Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Whether or Not podcast, the podcast for weather enthusiasts by weather enthusiasts. Today, we're joined by special guest, Extreme Meteorologist Reed Timmer.
Hello, Reed. Thank you for coming on with us.
Having me.
So, big question. Obviously, you are an extreme meteorologist. You are a storm chaser, and you went to the University of Oklahoma, which is where we go to school. And so, tell us kind of about first of all, how did your experience at the University of Oklahoma go? And what do you think of it as a university? And kind of how did you really get into weather like you did?
I had a great time at OU. I actually went there 17 years, so I almost dragged it out for 2 decades.
Wow.
But I went there for undergrad. I did my master's, and then I did my PhD at OU as well. And I always loved storm chasing. That's why I came to Oklahoma from Michigan to study severe weather and to storm chase. And I saw my first tornado down there freshman year, fall, October 4, 98. It was actually one of the biggest fall outbreaks in October there, early October. And I remember seeing 2 tornadoes off to the east of I-35. I was near the Perry, Oklahoma exit, and just saw those 2 tornadoes. And that was the first time that I experienced tornadoes. I didn't really know what I was doing storm chasing wise. I just knew that the tornado was on the southern side of the storm underneath the updraft base. But then that spring, we had the May 3rd, 1999 tornado. So you definitely learned storm structure really quick with that one. And we ended up getting a little bit too close to that tornado and had to ride it out underneath an overpass, which in hindsight was a big mistake. This was before all the research came out, but of us were packed in a soft top geo tracker and we were chasing that tornado, and it was coming over a hill about 100 yards away. So we decided it would be a bright idea to abandon the vehicle, and we ran to the overpass and clung to the overpass when the F5s went right by. But I was addicted to getting up close to tornadoes ever since, and I've been a full-time storm chaser also ever since then. So I think I'm going on 22 years. It definitely feels like yesterday, but
yeah, and that's a quite a long time to be a storm chaser, and especially do it as high profile as you have done it as well. One of the things that I did want to really ask you about was the documentary Tornado Glory. And I know that came out in the early 2000s, around 2003, 2004. And I think if I remember correctly, that was around the time that you were still, at school at the University of Oklahoma. So how did that whole documentary kind of come about? Like, how did you, was it kind of like a selection, like, the director of it wanted to experience it, or was this something you guys came up with, or how did that really all come about?
Well, our friend Ken Cole, Joel and I met while we were at the University of Oklahoma. He was also a meteorology student there as well, and he was studying film at the same time. And he was always into film and storm chasing, but we had storm chased before then, Joel, Ken, and I, but then as part of his film project, he wanted to do film Tornado Glory, where he'd ride in our backseat as we got up close to tornadoes. And so that's kind of how it all started, is by Ken's direction. And he followed us around a lot at school too, to kind of get the real life as a student storm chaser. And that was my first ever documentary that we did. And Ken used it, I think, for an undergraduate project, or maybe even for graduate school there. So we saw many tornadoes during the 2003 season, which was a pretty active season there. It was another El Nino year. That was an active season. 2007 was another active one, where we did the second documentary with Ken. That was in 2007, a year before Storm Chasers happened. But it definitely gave us a lot of practice, kind of doing on-the-fly interviews and being a part of a production. At first, it was a student production, and then Ken, everything came full circle again after Storm Chasers, after our work with Discovery Channel. We did Tornado Chasers, and that was also directed and produced by Ken Cole during that time as well. But it gave us a lot of practice to kind of ahead of Storm Chasers when we were doing that, doing on-the-fly interviews, and kind of also doing science at the same time, and kind of using media to do science. So I'm actually getting a call. That's the Dominator 4 that just got a new axle in. After chasing down to the Mid-South, the wheel was about to fall off. So I'm excited that I'm getting a new axle on the Dominator 4 before the Southern Plains get active next week.
Yeah, I saw your tweet for that. I was it's very lucky that we get a day like today where there's not very much weather happening, so you can actually make sure you have a storm vehicle to chase in. Another thing about storm chasers on Discovery. So how did the whole Discovery part of that come about? Did Discovery approach you and seeing your prior work with Tornado Glory and other stuff like that, or did you kind of approach them? How did that work?
They saw our work with Tornado Glory, and we had a trailer during the really active 2007 season when we got up close to a tornado in northwestern Oklahoma on the same day that the Greensburg, Kansas EP5 happened. So we got a bunch of up-close videos between 2005 and 2007 and also during 2003. And Storm Chasers was already being shot. It was shot for National Geographic, and then they had one season with Discovery Channel. And they were failing to see tornadoes back then with just the TIV. So they would license our footage. And that was kind of what I did full time, was just gather footage, license it while I was going to school and then grad school at the University of Oklahoma with a grad stipend and everything too. And then I was able to grow tornadovideos.net, which was the website that we used to sell DVDs back in the day. Discovery Channel found our footage through the website tornadovideos.net, and they also saw the Tornado Glory documentaries. And so I started licensing footage to those early seasons of Storm Chasers. And then one of the seasons after that, they decided to bring on our team the year after that. And then we did four seasons with Discovery Channel. And then we built the Dominators. In our second season, we built Dominator 1, and we started intercepting tornadoes directly. And had a mobile radar back then that we were able to scan vertical winds inside the tornadoes. And that was also the first time that we started launching trackable sensors into tornadoes too. At first we were using air cannons and whatnot, but now we're using real combustion and launching rockets into the tornado. So
yeah, that's awesome.
And I know that you're about to have an upcoming venture with National Geographic. I believe it's Category 6. How excited are you for that?
Excited, and we shot our first season last year during the 2020 season, and we were riding around inside of a Sprinter van, storm chasing and intercepting tornadoes, and we had to sleep in the van as well, which got a little bit uncomfortable. It was fun for the first couple of nights, but then as the season wore on, it definitely started getting a bit exhausting. But eventually we destroyed the van, and we had to tow it back to Denver after the season. But we saw big softball-sized hailstones and numerous mothership supercells, a couple of tornadoes. But the really active part of Category 6 was the hurricane season with so many landfalls there in the Gulf Coast. We had Hurricane Hannah, Hurricane Laura, Hurricane Sally, Delta, and Zeta. And Delta was intercepted down in the Yucatan and in the Gulf Coast. And we're deploying a new network of live streaming storm surge sensors and also microbarometers to collect data as those hurricanes come ashore. So that was exciting. But now we're kind of taking a pause with the Category 6 series. They're going to let Season 1 air, and it starts to air later on this spring. And then here in the U.S., I think late summer or fall, it's going to air. And if it does well, then we'll do more seasons.
That sounds awesome.
So now that we've talked a lot about your series and, the whole storm chasing, I want to learn about your storm chasing. So what do you look for when you're have a setup? What is I know the SPC issues outlooks, how far ahead do you plan? What models do you use, to, base, where you want to chase and set up your location days ahead?
Well, these days, the medium and long range models aren't as dependable as it seems as they used to be. But as I get closer to the event, of course, I love using the NAM model. I'm kind of a fan of the NAM, and the high resolution NAM I'm a big fan of that model. It's almost like an old pair of jeans, that you become used to, kind of like you start kind of going with the familiar pair of jeans. Well, here, let me take this real quick. I think it's about the Dominator 4. Can you guys pause for 1 second?
Yeah, totally good. Don't worry about it.
This is a brief SUSCORE intermission. We'll be back shortly.
It's fixed. It's good news.
Awesome. That's what
I
like
had to get a new axle on it, so it was making this big clicking noise, like the front left wheel was going to fall off during these recent chases. So
oh wow! Yeah, that's you don't want to have a parts failure with an EF5 bearing down on you.
No, definitely not. I've had that happen before too. In
Oh, boy.
2017, I was in the path of a tornado, and the traction control kicked in when I was trying to drive through this ditch and then escape just as the tornado was about to hit me. So I got stuck in the ditch and fell down on the back end. And I'm looking up at the sky, and I see all this debris come in and all these trees get blown down. And I was literally 100 yards away from an EF4 tornado. And my plan was to try one time to press the gas and see if I could pop out onto the road. And if that didn't work, then I was going to abandon the vehicle and try to run on foot as far away from the core flow as I could. And then maybe try to find a drainage pipe or a really low ditch or something to cling onto. But I tapped the gas, and then my vehicle just popped right out on the road. And I had to drive through the tornado for like a quarter mile with big trees and everything going overhead. And it was actually one of the few times I thought I was recording, but I ended up double tapping the record button. So when I was driving through the tornado, I never recorded any of that. But I recorded everything up until the last second, and then re-recorded again so I could look back and you could see the edge of the tornado. Sadly, somebody died in that. That was parked just like 50 yards away from me. They hit by the tornado and their vehicle got blown into the field, but that's the closest I've come to having big problems, I think. So.
Yeah, and even if you didn't have it recording, on a phone, you at least are going to record that in your memory forever.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So
the last question.
The last question was just like, what do you look for like in your models? What makes you want to go to the places you do, and like, what do you look for days ahead?
Definitely, I'm a big. I definitely focus in on the kinematics and the wind shear, kind of more so than just the presence of big cape. I definitely look for favorable photographs. You need a big level shear vector and sufficient critical angle to generate streamwise vorticity. So I definitely look for the biggest photographs and where those are co-located with surface-based instability. So really, to get a tornado, you need a surface-based storm, you need strong low-level shear, and you also need a discrete storm mode. Although I chase QLCS tornadoes too. So you also really need upper-level flow that is largely orthogonal to the initiating boundary to get storms to move off the boundary and get good supercell storms. But I definitely favor those areas with the strongest low-level shear. And during the high plane season, though, I kind of have my favorite zones that I look for. And I look for those 0 to 3 kilometer shear and instability streamers that kind of stream up to the terrain. And I target the western edge of those streamers where they meet the higher terrain, like those gaps in the terrain, basically. In southern Wyoming, there's a gap there to the west of Cheyenne, to the west of Laramie. There's another gap further north. Another one streams into the south and to the north of the Black Hills and wraps around into the high plains. So the high plains target areas are largely based on experience, too, where you know that the moisture streams into these gaps in the terrain, and you kind of look for where the 0 to 3 kilometer indices are most supportive of tornadoes further west. So I use different techniques when I'm forecasting for the Mid-South versus the Great Plains versus the High Plains, because the mechanisms for tornado production are so different. Kind of in the High Plains, you get easterly winds in the lowest couple of kilometers before it switches around to modest westerlies, where in the Great Plains, you kind of have a combination of the two setups. And then in the Mid-South, your low-level shear is largely driven by speed shear, even in the lowest kilometer or so. But you have a lot of wind shear in the lowest kilometer, kind of in the Mid-South and in the Great Plains. But in the High Plains, in the lowest kilometer, you're all easterly. So the 1 kilometer layer is kind of an underrepresentation of the true wind shear available to storms. So it depends on what region I'm forecasting. The high plains, you definitely kind of look for those gaps in the terrain where moisture is feeding in and where storms are going to move off the mountains. But in the Mid-South, it seems like over the last 10 years or so, I haven't been as effective as I used to be. And I think you kind of keep there's so much information coming in, so many models, so many opinions from other storm chasers out there too, that it's really important to simple and stay tuned to kind of how the large scale pattern is evolving when you're chasing in the Mid-South.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of information as well, I know there are a lot of storm chasers who storm chase purely for video footage and stuff like that. But as you mentioned earlier, there's a lot to do with science, a lot with your storm chasing and probes and stuff like that. I've noticed just for the past few chases that you've done, there have been a lot of subsonic probes that have been going up. And like I remember, I was just actually watching Tornado Chasers with the season 2, episode 10. Where you guys were at the 2013 Bennington EF3 with Kansas, and you guys were, right there, and you were trying to duct tape it on the pole and having to run on foot to get away, and the doors breaking, and you guys, and then afterwards you guys are just searching for the data and stuff like that. And so like there's a lot that adds a different element to storm chasing, obviously. But whenever you guys get the data back from those probes, what are you guys kind of looking for inside the tornado? And like what's the primary like research you guys are trying to do with that?
Our initial objective was just to collect as much data as we possibly could from inside tornadoes, and we were getting uniquely close to the tornado vortex. A lot of times it was in beater storm chasing vehicles, and I didn't have the budget to do science back in the day, but I always desired to do science. I mean, I was in Science Olympiad growing up, and my whole life has been dedicated to the sciences, and that includes video too. So video is the data that you can collect out there when you're storm chasing, and so much can be learned from high resolution video, especially from multiple angles of these storms. But as we got older and gained more resources, and especially during the Storm Chasers series, we were able to start doing research, and we realized that we were getting so close to tornadoes that we should definitely be collecting data. And that it gives us a unique opportunity to collect data inside tornadoes that other people maybe aren't willing to collect. And we've realized that we were kind of skilled at getting close to tornadoes. I don't have any other skills, but one of them, getting close to tornadoes, I think is the only one. So the availability of sensors that we can deploy and instrumentation that's reliable, collect any data point inside of a tornado, and that would be a big win, whether it was a barometric pressure fall, barometric pressure with ground-based probes inside tornadoes, mode 2003. But as we were storm chasing, getting close to these storms, we started seeing suction vortices, and compact tornado would spin up into these suction vortices that would be really violent in the air and cause a lot of destruction. And we finally got a sensor inside of a tornado in 2019 with a rocket launch inside the Linwood, Kansas EF4 there to the southwest of Kansas City.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also with talking about, collecting data and stuff like that, I've been following some of the stuff, in your circle, and especially with you about, I've noticed Dominator Weather, or Dominator WX, which is, it seems like it's this like, mobile weather station, potentially an at-home weather station and stuff like that. I noticed you guys have been talking about color palettes and stuff like that. I think I've seen on Chase and Spin's Twitter and stuff like that. So what are your guys kind of plans for that? How is that working? And does that also are you guys building a lot of that based off of your guys' experience with chasing storms?
So Chase and Spin on Twitter, his name is Mark, and he's the expert engineer that has been making all the instrumentation that we use and the trackable sensors that we launched into the EF4 tornado there in Linwood, Kansas. And if it weren't for Mark, then we'd just be throwing rocks into tornadoes, basically. So that's the key, is to be linked up with someone like Mark, and he's made it possible for us to collect data inside these tornadoes. And we met him just about 4 or 5 months before the launch into the Linwood, Kansas EF4 tornado, and he came down from Canada. Trackable sensors, lightweight sensors that were similar to the ones that we used back in the Storm Chasers days, and we were launching those into tornadoes. But any of the sensors that we launched back then that would get carried away by a tornado, we always lost those. So they ended up failing, and the technology wasn't quite at the point where we could launch a sensor and then dependably recover it. But Mark was able to accomplish that. He has all the equipment in his house, and he's a extreme engineer, basically. So he could build all those sensors by himself, and he could build pretty much anything if he has the resources. And he built those sensors, and Curtis Brooks and Sean provided Dominator 3. Curtis Brooks developed the rockets and the rocket launcher. He tested it using a rocket simulation software to make sure that it would fly perfectly into the tornado. And then we all met during May 2019 in Kansas and tried to launch on a couple of tornadoes. But then we finally found ourselves in the inflow notch of an EF4 tornado that was wrapped in rain just to the south of Lawrence. And we pointed the rocket launcher, which has pan and tilt capability, pointed it at the inflow notch and launched the rocket into the tornado. And then the parachute deploys, and it's carried by the wind inside the tornado. So basically, the high-resolution GPS data is equivalent to the wind speed, and it did 2 revolutions around the tornado, reached speeds of 190 miles an hour at the same time as it was causing EF3 damage at ground level. And we had measured pressure perturbations of about 113 millibars, negative pressure perturbations aloft in the tornado, kind of in the upper part of it. And we also measured some extreme updrafts in there, over 65 meters a second, up at about 3,000 feet aloft in the tornado. And then it just began tilted ascent all the way up to 30,000 feet. And we recovered it over 30 miles away from where we launched it, just to the south of Lawrence. So right now we just finished that paper, and our plan is to publish it in a journal article. Basically, the track of the rocket going up through the tornado and the supercell provides information on the 3D structure of the tornado with the supercell above it.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
And I'm glad that you bring up the whole science portion of it, because I know that you're a very big supporter of amateur storm chasing. You have I'm trying to think of the name of what you would call it, but your quote, never stop chasing. You've always pushed that. And I want to know how important is it that, we push for amateur storm chasing and student amateur storm chasing?
Well, I think storm chasing is good. When I was in school for meteorology, learning about all the science and memorizing all the equations and the derivations and all, the mathematics is almost like a language for the atmosphere and the motions in the atmosphere. But when you see it out there in the field with your own eyes and see the dynamics happening, unfolding in front of you, you see the mesocyclones rotating, hovering just above the ground, and you see a tornado touch down. And then you draw that connection with what you learned in the classroom, and you're forecasting as well to try to put yourself in position to see that tornado, and using what you learned in the classroom to actually track down the tornado that is unfolding in the real world, and calling in those reports to the National Weather Service and helping out directly in the warning process, and also participating in any student science field projects as well, as another way to help out when storm chasing. But I think that the experience gained through that is invaluable to our development as meteorologists. But at the same time, I think we need to be safe about it, and it's important for young storm chasers to go with to go storm chasing with people that know what they're doing at first and learn the basics of storm structure, because it definitely can be very dangerous out there when you're storm chasing and don't know how to find an escape route when you're up close to a tornado, or don't if you're unaware of some of the hurdles that you face out there, like getting stuck on a mud road in the path of a tornado, for example, and what to do if that happens, or getting your windshield blown out by massive hail, or you definitely don't want to panic and find yourself separated from the vehicle with hail that big. But it definitely can be dangerous. But I think if people go with veteran storm chasers at first and learn the ropes, then it can be a very safe and educational hobby that is vital to our development as meteorologists and scientists.
Yeah. And I like to hear about the avoiding mud roads, because we're part of a weather team. We're SUSCORE weather team. We've been on a couple chases. We saw our first tornado during the regional outbreak in the Texas Panhandle earlier this month.
13th.
And we saw, on the 13th. And we were in the Groom area when we caught some spin ups, and then we got caught in the inflow tail, I assume, from the tornado. We caught the tornado, and then it started getting rain wrapped. But then we moved to the west, and then the Clarendon tornado that was later in the day also ended up there, and we ended up on a dirt road and then in a ditch because of winds. So
yeah, and
I'm glad that you talk about that, because it's important to wonder where you're going.
Yeah, especially when you don't realize that AAA might take an extra day to be able to tow you out of the mud.
Yeah.
And speaking of just storm chasing and stuff like that, I was listening to the segment that happened last night with some of the people around our School of Meteorology here, and I noticed someone brought up the Taco Bueno tweet that you made the other day, which we all are going to have our own opinions about that. But one of the things I did want to ask is, what is the best place you've eaten on a chase? Like, if you had to pick of all the places, you're done catching your monster EF4 tornado and you need some grub, like what would be your number one place?
My favorite place is Jason's Deli, believe it or not. So I've been just hammering Jason's Deli since I moved to Norman in the late 90s and started going there every single day for a while. And then the Jason's Deli was hit by a tornado in 2014, and I actually missed that tornado, and I haven't been to that Jason's Deli since there in Norman. But I do go to Jason's Deli a lot. I think there's a lot of nutritious food there, good fiber and everything too. I'm a big fan of the chicken panini. But I also love all fast food taco places, Taco Bueno, Taco Bell, Taco John's. I like gas station burritos, of course, too. And I'm not a big steak guy, so I don't just get a massive steak after tornadoes. But sometimes I go to Applebee's a lot, just more for the atmosphere, though. I think kind of the ambiance in Applebee's is kind of what I prefer over the food. And, sometimes near midnight when you're looking for food, sometimes Applebee's is the only spot that you can find.
Yeah.
At least before the pandemic, Applebee's was a happening place and during peak storm season.
Yeah. And also, I know you mentioned, Gizmos walking around and stuff like that. Does she have a favorite chase that she's been on? I know dogs can't exactly talk, but Gizmo's got a personality that kind of transcends that, at least to me. So do you think there's been like a chase that she would probably say would be her favorite?
Yeah, I think probably the McCook tornado on May 17 in 2019 was her favorite. And she actually got inside that tornado too, and I was holding her the whole entire time. Kind of used my back to shelter her from the wind and debris, so I was getting a lot of debris impacts on my back. But Gizmo was kind of huddled up in my bread basket, and she actually had a little pink cast at the time because I broke her paw. She was running after a German Shepherd, and I wanted to prevent an altercation, so I dove on Gizmo to prevent her from reaching a German Shepherd, and ended up breaking her paw, kind of the end of one of her fingers. So she had this long cast, like a peg, that she was wearing that whole entire season. So I'd carry her around, and she had that little cast sticking out. But she made a full recovery from that, thankfully. Good. But I think from her perspective, that was probably, she's never scared at all. I don't think she really knows exactly what's going on with the tornado, but she's always just pretty relaxed. She doesn't like big hail anymore, though. She used to not have a problem with the big hailstorms, but just the last couple of years as she's getting older, she doesn't like the hail as much, and so I've been leaving her here at my mom's place so she can have a lot of treats nonstop, but I'll take her storm chasing once we get probably toward the Great Plains season. Maybe next week I'll bring her out there. Okay. She loves to go along. She just wants to be in the car when we're storm chasing. So she loves the whole process. When she was little and we left her at home, she was so upset and just wanted to go along with us. So.
Yeah, and I know we've also been kind of inspired by that, and we're thinking about getting potentially a storm chasing dog to come along with us too sometime. So that sounds really exciting.
And then we had a couple audience questions I posted online that you were coming on. So we had a few people that wanted to. Well, I guess we chose the best question that we had. Yeah. And it was, if you could relive one weather event, which event would it be and why?
Would it be one that I missed or just one?
Any weather event that's in your lifetime.
That's a tough one, but I'd probably relive the Manchester, South Dakota event, the 2003 wedge tornado that kept crossing right in front of us. And I'd replay that when we have our rocket sensors and be able to launch sensors into that tornado because it crossed so close just in front of us. And Tim Samaras had such great data from ground level inside that tornado that I'd love to relive that event. But some of the tornadoes that I missed, like the Chapman, Kansas long track tornado, I was targeting down near Wichita on that day when that long track EF4 happened. I would have chased the Katy, Oklahoma day. And down in the Mid-South, I made some mistakes here over the last 5 or 10 years, too, where it came down to one final decision. And just here recently on March 25th, I wish that instead of observing the Utah tornado, that I dropped down to Greensboro, Alabama, and then just chased that wedge all the way across. But instead, I chased the Utah tornado when it tried to cross I-20, and that delayed me by about 5 to 10 minutes. So I ended up missing the big wedge that went from Greensboro to Brent by about 5 minutes. But you definitely don't forget some of those tornadoes that you miss. But I think that it's important to always storm chase through the windshield and not the rear view mirror, or else you'll end up in a ditch.
Yeah, that's very, very important advice.
Yeah, you can't focus on the ones you missed. Just look at the ones that you've seen. But I would definitely replay the Manchester 2003 South Dakota intercept. And I'd replay a lot of those tornadoes, except with modern research technology, so that we can launch rockets into the tornadoes and try to collect data inside those.
Gotcha. And then my mother asked me to ask you a question. And I love my mother, and one of her, I think probably her biggest fear in life is tornadoes. So obviously me picking to, be a meteorologist and then also being a part of a storm chasing team definitely makes her really worried. So what's a piece of advice you would have to parents who are parents of storm chasers or aspiring storm chasers?
Well, that's a tough one, but she should talk to my mom, who's actually here. But she definitely was worried sick when I started storm chasing early on, and actually didn't want me to storm chase back then. And I think I ended up doing it anyway there for a little while. That resulted in us having some arguments early on. But then she became fully supportive of it when she realized how happy I was doing it and how it was my lifelong passion, and I was living my passion I always had when I was growing up. And then she was nothing but supportive of it, but she still hates when I chase hurricanes to this day. She does not like hurricanes. She knows with tornadoes that we're a lot more in control of where we can go, and we could drive away from those storms a lot more easily. But yeah, I think just has to stress how important it is to be safe and drive safe. But storm chasing overall is still a very safe hobby when you compare it to other things like skiing and skateboarding and riding a bike or just driving in general. So when you're storm chasing, you're a lot of times hyper aware of the conditions around you, and you're aware of where the storm is going, and you usually have a team of people. But the key is just to take it slow and make sure you don't hydroplane out there. But as a parent, I think the key is just to be supportive, but at the same time, continue to stress how important it is to drive safe and to exercise caution out there.
Yeah, I totally get that. And like I know like my mom's always really worried because, she in her mind, she'll have like tornado dreams sometimes at night, and in her mind, like every tornado is just gonna make a beeline for you and whip people up. And most times when storm chasing, especially the people who are experienced and know what they're talking about, know how to not, get hit by tornadoes. And
yeah, storm chasing overall is still a very, very safe hobby when you compare it to other things, and we're largely in control out there. And one thing with storm chasers is that we're experts at kind of assessing risk, and when we're in a dangerous situation, especially relative to the weather, and we know which way the storm is moving. We analyze the tornado relative to aspects of storm structure. We know where the hail cores are located and where the most dangerous part of the tornado is. And we're never alone out there. There's always storm chasers on the road. And these days, there's even long lines of traffic. And a lot of times you're friends with the people, and you're definitely never alone out there as a storm chaser. So overall, it still is very safe. But at the same time, it's important to stress safety and safe driving and defensive driving and all that, because it's important for us to be safe so that we can continue to live on and chase as many storms down the road as possible.
Of course.
And one last question for you is, what's one thing that most people don't know about you that's like really interesting or even surprising?
Yeah, especially just because I know, especially when you're doing podcasts or interviews or people talking about you, the number one thing they talk about is weather, storm chasing. But obviously, as humans, there is more to us than just our careers and just like that. So like, what's one thing about you that like, maybe not even necessarily weather related, that a lot of people don't really know about you?
Well, I collected insects for like 15 years during my life when I was younger. I have a big insect collection, and I focused on moths and beetles. So I've got like big beetles in my collection, Eastern Hercules beetles, stag beetles. Oh, wow. And I specialize in moths as well. So like silk moss, Promethea moss, Cecropias. I've got all those in there. But I also like to ride my bike, ski, do that kind of thing. I also like to golf, just be in the outdoors. But yeah, my insect collecting is probably one thing that people don't know.
Very interesting.
I like snakes and reptiles, stuff like that. So I like to flip rocks when I'm storm chasing when you're getting ready to pick a target area. A lot of times I'll meet up with my friends like Mike Scantlin and those guys, and we'll flip rocks and look for snakes and scorpions and things like that underneath the rocks. So that's kind of a fun hobby of mine as well too.
Definitely.
I'm a worm picker.
It definitely
rock
adds,
flipper.
definitely adds to like I guess your fearless personality that a lot of people would say you have, because I mean, if you talk about a lot of people's biggest fears, devastating weather and bugs would probably be up there.
Yeah, I think I'm more of I'm definitely a naturalist. I like the life sciences too and nature. I love all storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, lake effect, even nice weather I enjoy. So
yeah, good to know. Well, that just about does it for our questions. So is there any like kind of final remarks you'd like to make, just about storm chasing, weather, any of that in general?
No, I just think it's exciting that you guys are the next generation of storm chasers and meteorologists, where you're going to advance our understanding of weather. I mean, who knows what you guys are going to be capable of with doing science and understanding tornadoes and developing warning systems, and with drones as well. I think that drones are probably going to be a big part of the future of storm chasing, where you guys could just sit in your house and fly a drone and chase a tornado around, probably from the comfort of your own home or something. But it's exciting to think about, and I think I'm excited for our field with you guys taking over as storm chasers and scientists. It's important to be safe out there.
I totally agree.
Even though I'm pretty dangerous, it looks like I'm pretty dangerous out there. I try to be safe in between those moments, at least.
Definitely. Well, I really want to thank you for coming on. It was definitely a pleasure, and it was a dream of ours to, get somebody that inspired both of us to, do what we do, to get on and, inform even like our listeners, don't know much about weather. We have a lot of those, some of our parents aren't as weather informed, but they seem to really like this. And I'm glad to have, a real meteorologist on here, talking to them so they'll get to understand it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. And I look forward to seeing you out there next to a mesocyclone, maybe as early as next week.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to try to make it up there. Maybe we'll run across you somewhere.
Exactly.
All right. Never stop chasing.
Never stop chasing. You have a great day.
Guys, have a good one.
Thank you to Reed Timmer for coming onto our podcast. It means a great deal to us because we are a small podcast for someone as well respected as he is in the meteorology community to come on to our podcast. It's a very, very big honor for us to be able to talk to him about his storm chasing endeavors and to get advice, not only for us, but to all the amateur storm chasers who could listen to this podcast. And in general, everyone who listens to this podcast probably got something very, very important from Reed Timmer.
Yeah, and if you like this podcast, we have 4 more just waiting there for you, and other content on our page, such as chasing and many more things to come in the future. And if you like us, give us a like, subscribe maybe even. I think that you will have a great time with us here at SUSCORE, and we're looking forward to seeing you.
Yeah, I think this is definitely one of our best podcasts yet, and there is still a lot left for us. We have a lot of really big plans for the podcast. We have a lot of really big plans for some of our chases. And we're just getting started here at SUSCORE. So follow us at SUSCORE Weather on Twitter, SUSCORE WX that is, SUSCORE WX on Instagram. And also make sure you follow Reed Timmer. You can look up his name anywhere, and you will find his social media. And we are very, very grateful to have been able to talk to him, and very grateful that he's been a big presence in so many of our lives, and just a great role model for us to want to be storm chasers.
All right. You guys have a great day.